So we can speak to the government's Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden, who joins us now. Good morning, Mr. Dowden. Does feel like there are some reasons to be cheerful. Tomorrow we're going to see 6 people being able to meet outside in England, also outdoor sport restarting. What's the first thing you're going to be doing with your newfound freedoms?
Well, actually, with my newfound freedoms, first thing I'll be doing is going up to Warrington to see some rugby league, some grassroots sports happening. That's one of the things that we promised we'd do. We'd get grassroots sports back up and running first, and we've done that first after schools. And I think tomorrow is an important day. We're making progress with the rollout of the vaccine. We're making progress through the roadmap, which means that we can take some important steps tomorrow. First of all, allowing grass sports to resume, which is so important for our nation's physical and mental health, but also ensuring that people can once again meet their loved ones outside. Of course, it's important that we continue to abide by the rules, but this is an important step back towards normality.
And it's a step that we're able to take because, of course, the vaccine rollout has been going well so far. There has been some concern about bumpiness over the next month or so. But the Mail on Sunday reporting today that the Moderna vaccine could be rolled out to under 50s in about 3 weeks' time. Is that timetable broadly right? When should we expect to see Moderna hitting the UK?
Well, we're still on track with our timetable. So if you remember, we delivered for the most vulnerable people by mid-February. We're confident that we'll deliver for all over 50s by the middle of April, and also to the most vulnerable, remaining most vulnerable. And then by the end of July, we'll have vaccinated first dose.
But when should we expect Moderna specifically?
Well, we don't get into the details of supply chains, but the Health Secretary has indicated that he would expect later this month we'd start to see Moderna.
OK, now the Sunday Times is also reporting the UK is planning to offer 3.7 million vaccine doses to Ireland. Is that true?
Well, clearly our first priority is ensuring that we deliver vaccines in the United Kingdom. We clearly don't currently have a surplus of vaccines. Should we get to the point where we have a surplus of vaccines, we'd make decisions on the allocation of that surplus.
We've obviously seen vaccine rollout issues with the EU. There's been a threat to block exports of AstraZeneca to the UK as well. A deal is said to be close on that. What is actually happening?
Well, we continue to have constructive discussions with the EU. Our position is very clear, that the EU should not be engaging in blocking exports, and that they should honour the pledge that Ursula von der Leyen gave to Prime Minister Boris Johnson a short while ago, whereby they agreed that any contracts should be honoured. So that is to say that if vaccines have been provided in honouring of the contract, that should be honoured by the EU, and we expect them to abide by that.
OK. It does feel a little bit like we're not getting much clarity this morning on the vaccine supply issues, on the vaccine rollout. You're not telling us what the latest is on Moderna, despite the fact that we've been told that we've got this vaccine supply war going on. You're critical of the EU, of course. What is the situation? When are we going to be getting the next supply of vaccines such as Moderna in the UK? People are really worried. They want to know.
Yes, I understand people want to know, and we are very clear to people. We will deliver on the promises that we made. So the promise we made was that by the middle of April, the middle of this month, the first dose of the vaccine would be available to all over 50s and the remaining most vulnerable. And we said that by the end of July, all adults would get access to the first vaccine. And alongside that, we'd fill in the second doses within 12 weeks, as promised. I can assure anyone watching this programme that we remain on course to do that. Because we're on course to do that, that means we're still on course with the roadmap, which means that we are taking another important step from tomorrow towards back doing the things that we love. And this is the approach the government's been taking, sticking to the rollout of the vaccine and sticking to this cautious but hopefully irreversible roadmap. That's the important assurance that people should take, and it's only because we've managed to stick to that path that we can take those steps tomorrow.
So I just don't understand why you won't be more open about what's happening. We just expected to take it on trust that all of these things will happen on the dates you say. Why won't you just tell us when we can expect Moderna? It's quite a simple question.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say you have to take us on trust. I would say take us on our record. We said that the most vulnerable groups of people would get their vaccine by the middle of February. They got it by the middle of February. We've said that over 50s and the most vulnerable will get it by the middle of April. We'll deliver on that. We've also always said that there'll be ups and downs in the vaccine. We're not going to give a running commentary on the supply. I have also indicated, as the Health Secretary has said, that we do expect Moderna to come later this month. People should take the reassurance that we have delivered what we promised so far and that we will continue to do so. And as a consequence of that, we're able to take these cautious steps from tomorrow in removing some of the most restrictions in relation to COVID.
OK, the French Foreign Minister said that the UK will struggle with supplies for second doses, but Brussels won't be blackmailed, in his words, into exporting doses to try and solve the problem. Can you guarantee that everyone will get a second dose within that 12-week period?
Yes, of course, we have been planning that all the way through. So it's one of the most important considerations as we've rolled out the vaccine. Not only do we stick to our pledges in relation to the first vaccine, we must ensure that people get their second vaccine. So in all of our planning, we have factored in getting that second dose of the vaccine. And indeed, that is one of the most important things for the most elderly and vulnerable, that they get the added protection from that second dose.
OK, now, of course, given the fact that different countries are at very different stages of the vaccine rollout, one thing that a lot of people are worried about are what's going to be happening with holidays, what's going to happen with summer holidays. Is it true the government's considering like a traffic-like system to deal with that, where, for example, if an amber option would allow you to have a shorter quarantine period but with increased testing?
Well, we're exploring all these issues as part of the International Travel Task Force. That will be reporting at the beginning of next month. Grant Shapps, Transport Secretary, is leading on that, so that we will set out the next steps as part of that process.
So you are considering it then?
Well, we consider all options as part of the travel task force. I think you would expect that when government formulates policy, the way we do this is we look at all the different options, we weigh them up, we come to a position, and then when we've come to that position, we publish that position, and that's the position that we'll be setting out at the beginning of next month. Clearly, there are challenges around international travel. You only have to look across the continent and see the rising case rates in many of our nearest neighbours. It has been in the past the case that those rising infection rates have seen their way through to the UK. We're hopeful that that won't happen this time round because of our progress with the vaccine and so on, but we do need to be cautious about that. That is why we've got this review, we're looking at it carefully, and you'll get the results of that at the beginning of next month.
OK, considering all options, we look forward to a bit more detail on that. Let's see if I can get a bit more detail on something else. You've said you've been looking at vaccine passports as a way of allowing people to go back to, for example, live sporting events. Is that likely to happen, and how is it going to work?
Well, this is an important consideration, one of a range of different mitigations that we are using looking at as we progress through the roadmap. So if you remember, Sophie, we've made the commitment that, all being well, stage 3 by the 15th of May, we'll get back to essentially the position we were last summer. So, for example, you'll be able to have social distancing indoors and outdoors, but that means that many areas of our national life, for example, theatres or large sporting events, still don't remain viable. And it's really essential that we get to the point whereby those things can operate viably commercially, and that means some further easing of restrictions. That's why we've said by stage 4 we'll look to remove as many of those restrictions as we possibly can. Now, we're conducting a range of pilots as to how we can achieve that, and we're looking at all sorts of factors. So, for example, ventilation, we're looking at behaviour, we're looking at the spread risk, so we're testing before and after. But it's also important that as part of that, we consider the role that COVID certification might play. Now, that work is being led by my colleague, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and it's an important factor that we need to consider as part of this.
OK. As you said, it's been an incredibly difficult time for a lot of the industries that your brief touches on, whether it's sport, whether it's culture, whether it's hospitality, of course, very linked to some of those big venues as well. Now, your department's been given almost £2 billion to support the culture sector. Has all that money been given out now?
Well, remember the first allocation was £1.5 billion, so that's for this financial year. We've already announced £1 billion worth of that, helping over 4,000 organisations up and down the country. So, for example, I'll be going up to Wolverhampton tomorrow to see the theatre there, another beneficiary of that. And at the end of this week, we'll announce the remaining allocations to take us up to the £1.5 billion. That will see those organisations through to the end of June. Then the Chancellor announced at the budget a further allocation of £300 million. The focus of that really is about helping those organisations reopen and restart as we progress along the roadmap, and we'll be opening applications for that final phase very shortly.
I'm struggling to see why it's taken so long to get the money to where it's really needed, because the 1.57 million was announced last 1.57 billion, announced last July. You say £1 billion of that has been given out. National Audit Office found only 495 million paid out by February of this year. When we've seen reports of theatres closing, of football clubs on their knees, of live music venues shutting down forever, why has it taken so long to actually get some of this money out?
Well, so there's a range of different points you raise there. First of all, clearly things have moved on since the National Audit Office report in February. We did make a conscious choice, though.
It's just to come in there, though, just to come in there, because I accept your point that things have moved on since February, but this money was announced in July, so it's been pretty slow.
Sorry, I was trying to answer the second point, which is that we did make a conscious choice in relation to the remaining 400 million. We held that back because we wanted to see how we progressed through this year. And from the conversations we had with theatres and other organisations, they wanted us to have that flexibility. We'll be announcing the allocation of that further amount of money. We've rolled forward the time that they can use that till the end of June. And then clearly we haven't been able to allocate the extra 300 million. The Chancellor just announced that in the budget, and that was always intended for the next financial year and to help that recovery process. You also mentioned sport. Just today we've announced most of the remainder of the sports winter survival package, and again we'll be moving on to the summer survival package that will apply from the beginning of the new financial year. And in relation to all of those, in relation to theatres, our sporting institutions up and down the country, I remember when this crisis first hit, I was being warned that we could lose vast swathes of our culture and sporting life. It is only thanks to those interventions that we have made that we've been able to protect them. And the vast majority of our theatres, the vast majority of our sports clubs have been protected thanks to those interventions that sit alongside things like the furlough scheme and others that have helped our national life survive the terrible impacts of the COVID restrictions.
While we're on sports and culture, what's the latest on whether the Euros could be held in England?
Well, we are committed to holding the Euros, and we fully expect that the Euros will happen. So yes, they are going ahead as planned. The big moments of the Euros are going to happen in the UK, so that's to say the semi-finals and the finals. There will be some group matches as well. It's always been the case that other matches will take place across Europe, and we expect that to remain the case.
OK, that makes sense. And sticking on football, the England captain Harry Kane has said that the squad needs to have a real think about whether or not to join other national teams who are protesting about human rights abuses in Qatar, who of course are going to be the venue for the World Cup in 2022. Do you think the UK and the England football team needs to be a bit stronger in calling out Qatar's record on human rights?
Well, we as a government never hesitate in calling out human rights abuses wherever they happen. In terms of the actions that England football players take, I've always said it's up to them. It's not for me as Culture Secretary to be prescribing what they should and shouldn't do. They'll act appropriately and they'll make decisions between themselves.
So it's up to footballers, not government ministers then?
So for government ministers, we have been absolutely clear in terms of calling out human rights abuses. In terms of actions that footballers themselves take, that's clearly up to them.
David Cameron is being investigated by a lobbying watchdog, the one he set up actually, over his work for Greensill Finance Group since leaving Number 10. Now, this was originally reported by the Financial Times, him contacting Rishi Sunak's private phone to try and get access for that company to a loan scheme set up by the government. Now, the Sunday Times details this morning how Lex Greensill, who set up this company, was given some pretty extraordinary access to government when David Cameron was Prime Minister. At the time, you were David Cameron's Deputy Chief of Staff. Did you ever meet Lex Greensill? Did you raise any concerns about the access that he was given?
Well, I've been racking my brains. To the very best of my recollection, I never met with them, but I can't say for sure. I'd have to check over the records, but I have zero recollection. I'm pretty sure that I didn't meet with them. But I think you raised investigation. I believe that David Cameron has been cleared as a result of that, and any appropriate meetings will of course be properly declared. And I don't think there was any change in government policy, and certainly from working with David Cameron over a number of years, I always found him a man of the utmost integrity, and I've no doubt that that would pertain in this situation as well.
Quite a lot of the allegations in the Sunday Times this morning are talking about how Lex Grinzer was given access through Jeremy Hayward, of course, head of the civil service at that point. Is that something that should raise any concerns, or do you think it merits further investigation?
No, I think all of these things will have been properly declared. I remember when I worked in Downing Street, we had very tight restrictions about the declarations of meetings. Those would be fully in the public domain. Clearly and sadly, Jeremy Hayward is no longer with us, but again, he was somebody that always abided punctiliously with the rules in relation to engaging with third parties.
OK, and just finally, there's been an outpouring of allegations about harassment, assault, abuse against some of Britain's leading private schools. What's happening? Is there an investigation that's taking place, and how important is it that the government prioritises this?
Well, these are very serious allegations, and clearly any child at school, or indeed anyone, needs to feel safe. And if there are concerns that people have, they must raise them with responsible adults or with the police. In terms of the actual steps being taken, there is the independent schools investigation and inspection regime, and the DfE can call them in and will deal with that as appropriate. So either take measures to deal with those safeguarding issues, or ultimately to close the school. So we have those independent inspection regimes, and it's important those are undertaken as appropriate.
OK, Oliver Dowden, thank you very much for being on the show this morning. Oliver Dowden there.